Dude, I'm on the wrong Wi-Fi.
Oh boy. And welcome everyone to the Shitlord Preachers podcast. This is episode 50, the big old 50, Brook.
Is that a swipe at my age, Amos? No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. No, welcome everyone to the show. My name is Amos Joseph, joined by my friend Brook Potter, who's in the UK. And basically, this is a show where he and I, who are former preachers, now shitlords. Basically, we come on the show and we talk about a lot of different issues. And today we're going to be touching on a really interesting issue. But how's it going today, Brook?
It's going great, man, Amos. It's good to be back. Spring has officially started again. I think this is the third try, so hopefully it's really off the ground this time. And I spent some time out today, got some coffee. I did go to see Avengers last night, so we'll definitely have to do like a discussion about that, probably in a week or so, give the people a chance to see it without giving away any spoilers. But yeah, it's going well, man. How's it going up for you out there in the great up north?
It's going good. I mean, spring is coming and going. There was a winter storm watch yesterday. And I looked outside and there was like a freezing drizzle kind of thing. So it wasn't snow. And then I was at the Minnesota Libertarian Party convention. So that was interesting.
We're gonna have a lot to talk about.
We could talk about that some other time. But today we're having a guest on, Corey Dresser. How's it going, Corey?
Hey, I'm all right. I'm here and I'm alive. And I'm awake. So that's good, I guess.
Basically, we're having Corey on today because he, as well as us, are really interested in the red pill. He's actually from Richard Cooper's men's group that I'm a part of. And we had a conversation a while back on one of the meetup kind of hangout kind of things we do with Richard Cooper, and started talking about religion and the red pill. Then we also noticed Rollo Tomasi, who is the writer of The Rational Male, had also been talking about it, and he'd been having some good discussions on it. So we figured we'd have some really good discussions on it too, because it's interesting how the red pill and everything is pretty much how it's overlaid with a lot of principles and ideas that you find in the Bible as well. So any thoughts you wanted to start off with, Brook? I know there's a lot of stuff on this. What are some things that you find?
I will just say this for the listeners before Corey gets. I mean, both Amos and myself were former preachers, and we came from kind of a Eastern Orthodox kind of perspective. And when it comes to the discussion of faith, as I'm sure Corey will agree, a lot of it is subjective. So we're not saying that we know everything. We're not saying that our interpretation is correct. We're just sharing our own personal experience, and as it comes to intergender dynamics, how that relates in our personal journey of faith. So I'm very interested to hear what Corey has to say on this. My friend, please introduce yourself. Tell the people who you are, Corey.
Well, hi, y'all. I'm Corey Dresser. As they said a couple times, they're still correct. I haven't changed that since the last 30 seconds. I'm 28, but I started working in the church and in ministry when I was 18. My brother was a youth pastor of a little Baptist church next to my high school. And so I became the associate youth pastor, helping him out, which really sucked because it was all voluntary, but I was also 18 and stupid. So I could have gotten paid. I just didn't know I could. So that's fine. I did that volunteering, helped organize events and all that kind of stuff, and got, the taste of what ministry's like. And surprisingly, a lot of it is old ladies fighting for power, but especially in little Baptist churches. But since then, I ended up going to college. I got a bachelor's in theology, and I started working in Christian social work. I was working at a residential program for like young adults and high schoolers, essentially. They were running around think of like juvie, but we forced them to go to church and Bible studies and stuff like that. There's a lot of locked doors. There's a lot of restraining kids, but it was a social work program trying to help them get out to there. And that place was messy. It was intense. And because it was a religious organization, they didn't have to report a lot of their practices to the government. So they got to get away with a lot more than other places. I eventually switched out of that job into secular social work, I still have that urge to help people, but I kind of got jaded from all of the crazy practices from the last 2 places I worked. And they were actually helping people, though they don't have all the same, values you'd say as other Christian places. But like, there was still a lot of paperwork, a lot of weird stuff, and there's always office politics when it's some kind of corporate environment, even if it's a nonprofit corporate. But they were actually a lot more ready to help the kids instead of like just trying to show off how nice and cool they are. So I ended up switching to social work. That's what I'm doing now. I actually just put in my resignation for my current job yesterday. Now I'm on vacation and I'm starting a new job in 3 weeks. So at a different organization. So that's where I am now. I've been studying a lot of red pill my whole life, those kind of topics. And I've just realized this whole thing going with the rationale and all that. I kind of knew I needed to get in and put in my 2 cents because I've been doing this for a while, kind of seeing the nitty gritty behind the red pill and the religion aspects of life.
Could you touch on that a little bit? Like, how did you get in? You said you've been into the red pill for a while. So give us a little bit about how you got into it. What have you read? Where you're at now, sort of thing.
Yeah, I would say, to me, I've always kind of had an anti-authoritarian like philosophy where I was like, why do I have to go to school? Like, and all those times. And it all kind of came from like, my mother did something really stupid when I was younger, when I was like 10 or 11. She did something crazy. And then that just kind of like the dawn of me, oh crap, adults don't know everything. They're all stupid too, And so because of that, I kind of like immediately went on my own journey of like not listening exactly to school, what school's telling me, not listening to always what my parents are telling me, not always listening to what other adults or pastors are telling me. I'm like, well, you guys are just as screwed up as me. So I don't get how I can value your information more than my own that I'm personally experiencing, especially when they contradict. So because of that, I kind of just got my C minuses in school, all of that kind of stuff, just to get it out of the way because it's like a mandatory prison sentence when you're younger. And so I kind of went my own way, kind of learned my own things, and I ended up parenting myself is how I would call it.
Wow.
Trying to find things out myself because I didn't trust my parents anymore. And I didn't trust the school system or the teachers because they're telling me a lot of things that were contradictory to what I was experiencing and seeing happening. And so I've kind of had that red pill mindset ever since I was like, 5th grade. So I just kind of gave up on all of that. And ever since then, I've been going into this, and I've been purposely trying to find the opposite of what the government's telling me or the school's telling me, like, this is how this is. And I'm like, okay. And so I always wanted to play devil's advocate of everything, just so I know for sure that there is a point on this side and a point on that side. But nobody wants to talk about the point on the other side because that's not what the school wants you to know. So, I've always just had that mindset. And then once I got introduced to the men's community, this actual manosphere and red pill came from when I was dating a very crazy BPD single mom, which is the worst of all worlds.
Wow.
Ooh, the devil incarnate.
Yeah, that was really like 2 years ago. So I had the intellect and I knew how to do the grow up talk of all of that, get yourself together and get yourself straight. But I was not a ladies' man. You know what I mean? I for some reason, I've always had that dad vibe where all the people coming after me were always women older than me and already had kids. So I guess I had a dad vibe ever since I was a kid because all the moms are all over me all the time. I don't know if it's the cargo shorts and mowing the lawn, but it's something,
You must be tall. How tall are you, man? Just out of curiosity.
I'm 6'3". Yeah. And I'm definitely not a small dude in any aspect. So
that's it.
yeah. I've always been big. I've always been loud, and school doesn't like that. So it's another reason my school hated me. Yeah. And then I got introduced through Corey Wayne, who's a dating coach online, and I'd consider him like half-pilled, purple-pilled, kind of thing, where he gives a lot of contradictory advice, to what people tell you. Listen to the girl and buy her flowers and always be nice. And always text her more than she texts you, all that kind of blue pill crap. Ooh. And so Corey Wayne was the first person I looked up online that actually said the opposite of that. So I listened to him, and he has all of his ebooks and audiobooks are free, which is awesome. So I just got one, put it on Audible, and would listen to it in the car. I listened to it 3 or 4 times, and I'm like, wow. I'm like, it was weird. I didn't even have a weird conversation with that ex. This is all around the same time 2 years ago. Everything just worked. I didn't have to try. I didn't have to do anything. And it was just really the mindset shift of how to view women now through a red pill lens. It just worked. And now I just don't care. You know what I mean? And then she ended up going crazy and trying to stalk me and all this stuff because I had such a fast attitude switch so quick. She just didn't know what was going on and was trying to get in my life and stalking me and like going to my apartment complex and all that kind of stuff, like months after we broke up. It was kind of crazy. But yeah, from Corey Wayne, I got introduced to Stephen Molyneux, who had a big series on single mothers, which led me to Rich Cooper's channel because he has a bunch of series about single mothers and like why dating him is that kind of stuff. And that kind of just, opened the floodgates to all the other Red Pill content. And then, that's when I officially feel like I was a part of the manosphere and I got plugged in. So, yeah.
That's
it's a crazy
amazing.
long story. I'll try not to be so long-winded next time. But yeah.
No, it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Now Richard Cooper's in all sorts of trouble because of that single mother comment.
yeah, it's crazy.
Amos, do you want to tell just briefly your story and how you got into the red pill?
Yeah. So, same thing. Well, Brooke and I have known each other since before, I guess, either of us really got really into the red pill. I know Brooke had been, Brooke, you'd known a lot about like just love dating stuff, right? You were,
I was the old school David D'Angelo, W Dating, Mystery, all those guys. So it was all the pickup artist stuff back in the day.
Yeah, because I remember you had a lot of that going on for you, like right before I met you and stuff, and we just never talked about it. Then I, again, religious myself, went through, when I was 18, I pretty much just literally the day before the first day of college, I dropped out and flew down to Dallas and worked with the ministry for 6 months, doing video work, and then came back, went right back to just working. And in between working, I was pretty much working to save up money to then go on missions trips where I actually worked with a ministry that I eventually started to met Brooke with. And then through all of that, being a minister and speaking at different events, traveling, we eventually had a conference in 2013. Was it 2013? Yeah.
Yeah.
And met a girl there, and she pretty much fell in love with the preacher persona. And then my father died right as we started dating. So it was just a bad mix of emotions and thoughts, and me completely not red pilled at all, really blue pilled, because I mean, a lot of our theology was very much, we're kind of, for the listeners and for Corey, we were kind of what's called like I guess part of our theology was what's part of the grace movement. So for the listeners too, people like, terms of theology and talking about like love and God and such, we were into like people like Joseph Prince. I don't know. What are some preachers, I guess, that would identify?
I mean, the big ones would have been like Paul White, Joseph Prince, C. Baxter Kruger. I mean, these people help with, understanding the Jewish mindset to the scriptures and stuff like that. Paul Young.
Right. Yeah. And then, so, I mean, you could really say a lot of the love and the grace aspects of that and applying that to a relationship is probably not the best. So, I mean, it's a good outlook it's a good worldview, and it's a good way to look at things spiritually, but to apply it to a relationship with people, yeah, no. So, basically met this girl at this conference we did, and went from pretty much talking to dating within a month. And then it was a long distance relationship. I was here, she was in another state, and we went back and forth seeing each other. And October of 2013 we were dating. February of 2014 we were engaged, and then we moved in together June, and then we were broken up by December. During the whole breakup process, which similar to kind of Corey's situation with just sort of the BPD thing started coming out, and it all started coming out real. I mean, there were small bits of it through the relationship, and I just didn't know what was going on. The random, on our way to holiday get-togethers with family, screaming at me on the way there, things like that. I just didn't know what the heck was going on. I just thought, having a bad day. But later on, surprisingly, another girl I went on a date with months after, who was taking courses in psychology told me, "Oh yeah, that's borderline personality disorder. I have that too." And I'm like, "Oh, well, this is the last date."
Talk about red flags.
Yeah, it's weird how it's like a magnet. Once you get one, you get a lot. They come.
You're attracted.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, so basically, yeah, found out about all that and realized, oh wow, good thing I dodged that, because we got engaged and postponed the wedding and then just called it off. Obviously with the breakup, it was just done. So I start, going down it's basically kind of like a downward spiral with a lot of things, depression and all this. And slowly started kind of getting back into looking into dating, and I start looking on like OkCupid and Tinder and some of these things, and basically was kind of very bitter about a lot of things. I would just start like screenshotting stuff and sending it to Brooke, and like, look at these women, who the hell do they think they are? They're posting this, they're saying this and that, kind of that really blue pill rage. And basically Brooke kind of sets me straight and says, "What, do you hate women?" And I'm like, "What? No, what are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, you act like it." So he starts changing my mindset on it. I think the first book Brooke got me was The Game by Neil Strauss, and then he recommended I look into The Rational Male, and that really got me thinking about things. Once I listened to that, and I was like pretty much telling him everything I was learning from it, it started to click. And then again, found out about Richard Cooper, then joined his group middle of last year. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good story, man. And I'm not going to be that long. Let me just fill our listeners in. Yeah, I used to be, before I became like involved in ministry and stuff like that, young man. I'm probably maybe the oldest in this crew.
You are.
Yeah, clearly I am. So I was there in the early days, mystery, the Book of Pook. For those who really know about that, David D'Angelo, Double Your Dating. Yeah, there were a couple others. And so I was involved in that early on in Christianity. And then a woman in my church that I was just involved with, she came and said, I was going on a dating show. There was this local show in my home country of Trinidad and Tobago called Mismatch. And they had people on talking about relationships and stuff. And I was like, these people don't know shit. I know everything. So I was telling them I'm going on this show to basically, set them straight. And the woman said, "What is that about?" I said, "Well, it's about dating and game. And, and for these guys who know, it's about displaying confidence and negging the woman a little bit, ignoring her a little bit, that kind of stuff." And I explained this to the woman. And she says, "Oh, no, that's of the devil, because that's all manipulation of the mind." And I'm like, "What? Oh, dang, I didn't even know." And I said, "Well, I got to stop doing that." So for a better part of a whole bunch of years, I was just stuck in the church, pacified, kept under wraps. When I got out of ministry, got out of everything else, within the recent years, I moved out to the UK. And part of that journey was about self-discovery. Who am I? What does it mean to be a man? What kind of man do I want to be? All of that kind of good stuff. And I realized I had a good knack for this kind of, dating, intergender dynamics and stuff like that. So I got back into it. And that's when I rediscovered, Richard Cooper definitely got back into, I read The Rational Male, and it's like, dang, I thought I knew stuff and I clearly didn't know shit. I was like, I was a complete moron. And that just totally transformed my life. I put Amos onto it. I put a couple of the flatmates that I was living with. And yeah, it's been no looking back. I mean, I've recently had a girlfriend, great girl, wonderful, very, sexy, all these other kinds of things. We got along in every way, but she had a lot of red flags that I've learned not to ignore. And yeah, we could probably get into that. Excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that was interesting too, is when I would meet up with Brooke, although I was kind of stuck in the blue pill, he would, even just the basic PUA stuff that Brooke would do, the way he would carry himself. I remember the restaurant you went to when you came here, Brooke, and we met that waitress, and I was just like, what? Yep. And like, you just started talking to her, and I just looked at you, no red pill knowledge whatsoever, and I'm just watching him talk to this girl, and I'm like knowing exactly what's going on. So there's something, and that kind of basically told me like there's something about red pill and game that is so self-evident. Like for men, when they see it, they know what's going on, but we've just never been exposed to that to really like have skills or practice it. So I mean, what do you think there, Corey? You think that's kind of there's something about that? Like there's
I don't know. I know I'm definitely not the expert in the women's side of the red pill. I've always studied the philosophy and theology back half, but I mean, it's true that like game is a thing. You know what I mean? Like clearly it works. There wouldn't be so much of a blog sphere. There wouldn't be so much of so many books and people using it if it wasn't an actual thing. You know what I mean? And so you could only sell something wrong so many times. But this clearly it works to an extent. Everyone wants their own flavor of like pivot and twisting it around to their version of it and all that kind of stuff to sell and market it. But at the end of the day, the principles are true. I just honestly, that's never been my cup of tea. I just do enough to get by, So I'm pretty monk mode, airing on MGTOW right now. So I got a lot of stuff I want to do. I'm investing in real estate and all that kind of stuff. So all of that's kind of on the back burner in my personal life right now. But like, I get it and I understand it. I just at this point in my life, it's trying to purposefully go out my way and learn game and go to women and all that kind of stuff just isn't in my repertoire, if I want to use a fancy word.
Right. Now, what have been some things that you've kind of noticed, looking at your background in theology, and as you've looked into the red pill, where do you see some interesting things kind of overlap?
Yeah. I would say, yeah. We're talking about it a little bit before we went live, but just a really simple concept. But in general, the church, and Rollo talks about this a lot, the church is kind of like a blue pill or a beta factory is what he calls it, I believe, where the church at the moment is very that. However, the contradictory is that the biblical principles are not being taught in the church, and the biblical principles intertwine pretty well with red pill dynamics. And so I steer a lot of people into, yes, the church sucks. Everyone's talking about how the church sucks right now. However, where is the truth behind it? Where's the good part we can move to? And so I feel like the Bible is very red-pilled, and I think we all kind of agreed on that. And there are certain topics within there that intertwine. One of the small examples was there's a proverb that says, gird yourself and your horse for battle, but the winner belongs to the Lord. Which is a lot of outcome independence, a lot of, choose where you're giving, can we cuss? I don't know.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
Yeah. And there's a lot of red pill things about where to give your fucks and what fucks to give. And the Bible talks a lot about like, here, just do these things, but give no fucks about like the result. Be outcome independent. It's an abundance mentality type thing. I think abundance mentality and that, outcome independence are very intertwined, shown through the Bible and shown through the manosphere. Yeah.
That when you brought that up, I had like absolutely no idea. Because when I was thinking red pill and religion, I was really thinking about a lot. Was really spurred on by a lot of the topics that Rollo was bringing up. So he brought up just simple things on like how feminism and such had been basically infiltrating. Do you have headphones there, by the way, Corey?
I do not at the moment. I left them at my work, and I'm on a 1-week vacation. So
okay, well, we'll want to have your speakers turned down a little bit because there's a little bit of an echo, I think. Basically, excuse me. Yeah, a lot of it was looking at mainly the sort of like you said, how the Bible tends to be very red-pilled, but somehow the church is this whole blue-pilled thing. And even like, I mean, there is, I kind of look at it as, so in terms of like guys in the red pill, like a lot of people will like roll to Masturbation. I think a lot of guys have sort of different, like you were saying, different flavors. I personally, I really like the approach of someone like Ryan Stone.
Yeah.
He's, he talks a lot about sort of there's like, you never want to go full red pill, because that's like, that tends to be, I say like full red pill is like going back to being a caveman that's going to like club a woman over her head and take her back to your cave. Whereas his approach is like, you have a lot of red pill early on, and then you incorporate a little bit of blue pill for comfort. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to nag, you're going to do this, you're going to be crazy in the bedroom. And then, but there is the comfort part to like not completely scare this woman away,
Yeah. How I would say to that is a lot of, the society of today is not the biblical society then. So there are things that are going to need to be adapted to the society we're in. And I think that agrees a lot with you need to put some blue pill in it, so to speak, is that we have a very pro-feminist, we have a very leftist society right now in America, at least.
Right.
I don't know nothing about the UK, so I can't talk about that.
The UK is even worse. Trust me, it's even worse than the US. Definitely.
Yeah. I actually have a brother in Scotland right now. He's doing an internship for a church up there. So
awesome.
Yeah. I haven't been there myself, but he says he likes it. So, but he says the Taco Bell's way too far away, But what was I saying? Sorry, I went off track there. But yeah, in general, our society is pretty blue pill, very feminist, very leftist right now. So in order to survive in that, and that's one of the things I care a lot about, is like not just you being aware, but how to be like a man missionary or a red pill ambassador, into that. Because when you talk about this stuff, you kind of got to be hush hush. A lot of people have to change their names, you know what I mean, when we talk about this kind of stuff, because you can get attacked for having this opinion, And so you need to be able to present the message, but still be accepted as a messenger, if that makes sense. And what I aspire to a lot is Paul's missionary approach. I think would be very beneficial for the red pill community in general, where he says, to the Jews I became a Jew, and to the Greeks I became a Greek. I became all things to all men so that I might save some. And a lot of people have heard that verse before, but how I get that is you need to focus on the big things and get rid of the small things. Like don't really have an opinion on those, willing to give up those opinions for them so that they accept the messenger. Like one of the examples of a pastor I talked to, he talked about like, I hate wearing a tuxedo, or I hate wearing a suit. I hate formal clothing so much, but I will wear it when I preach at this church because that is a small thing I'm willing to give up so they'll accept me, so they'll hear my message. Because if he goes in like, a dirty old,
jeans and a t-shirt
and some ripped up jeans, they're not going to listen to him. You know what I mean? That's just unfortunately how fickle a lot of people are. And you can either be mad about it or you can accept it and move on and work with it,
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of something we even came out of as we were going through ministry. We could see like the way I kind of told people, especially like people who were kind of moving along with us in terms of, I mean, we didn't want to say, red pill, but there was a sense of a red pilling of theology that we were going through, kind of, breaking out of the typical ideas of like heaven and hell and such like that. We question a lot of that. And so people would kind of say like, well, how am I going to talk to like, the really hardcore Christians at this church that's nearby? Like, I want to go there. I want to meet people, but man, they're speaking completely different language. Like there was a lot of this, they're so below us. And it's like, yeah, but think of it this way. Don't think of your like, so you're looking at a higher and lower thing. Like, don't think of it so much as like, you got to chop your legs off to be at their level. Think of it as just taking like going down to their level, like, basically kneeling down to like get on their level to like talk to them in the way they understand. Like different people are in different places, so you have to be able to adapt to that, whether it's like, someone that's just really talking about one thing, like you got to be able to like, okay, how can I take this? And it sounds bad, but how can I water this down enough to get them to like get the key points to then work with them back to where I am, or where, at least to help get them the ability to like think beyond just the four walls of their church, so that they can kind of go, oh, there's more than just what the pastor's saying on Sundays. I can actually read more of the Bible. I can actually look at stuff on the internet and kind of leading him in that journey to like grow. And that's once I kind of saw that too, with just now and being in the world, I got to be really cautious with some things I say. I can't just, oh yeah, someone will say, like yesterday there was a conversation I was involved in with some people at this convention, and I basically said something like, oh, there was this woman there that was she was dressing a certain way, and she said it was interesting because it got her in with like talking to people about libertarianism, and she was very open with that, which I think was good. And she was talking to a couple, and then she said, yeah, then the boyfriend, wanted to connect with her because he wanted to learn more about this, but then he like asked his girlfriend, is this okay? She was right there. I just by instinct I said, you don't have to do that, just go for it. Like, why is he gonna ask the girlfriend? Just get she's right there. They know that she knows the conversation. You're a man, do that. And then like everyone kind of jumped on that, like, hold on, if your girlfriend's there, you gotta. I'm like, okay, I'm not touching that, But it is that kind of thing, like you're saying, is being all things to all people. What are some ways, I guess, what have you had to do though when you're dealing with a lot of these? I'm guessing you have a lot of friends who are still very much blue pill Christians. How do you talk to them?
Not only that, the hard part I've had, because I talked to Rich and Rollo and Anthony, pre-schism about this, about the whole man missionary part and how to bring that up, because right now I'm in secular non-Christian social work, which that atmosphere is very different. You know what I mean? One of the things I talk about is like I have a bunch of clients. Most of my clients are in the like 18 to 21 range. And right now I'm working with like homeless youth, trying to transition them into independent living and independent thinking and all that kind of stuff. But what the social work wants you to tell them and what I want to tell them are diametrically opposed, because they want me to tell them, go get a crappy job at McDonald's, get enough money, save for community college, go to college, now go to real college, get the debt. It's okay. Everyone has to do it, blah, blah, blah. Start making car payments, start doing all of this stuff, live in an appropriate place that we think is acceptable, and that's a lot of stuff I don't want to teach. And so I spoke with them. I did a call-in when they were doing a little show, and we talked about how can I help these kids see like actual truth while not getting fired by my hyper leftist social work, office. And I had to use that Paul missionary technique. I had to realize, what do I really want to teach them, and what can I just give into so that I'm not nonstop, anti-authority all the time? How can I smile and nod at work, and then when I actually go meet with my clients, I do what I need to do, and
not get fired. Ultimately.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the hard point, is learning to not get fired while living in a hostile environment. And like, I would allude this to the church now, because when you talk about these, red pill principles in a feminist church, you're a bad guy. You know what I mean? To them, you're the bad guy. You know what I mean? You're all that's wrong with society, and you're not a real good Christian because you won't date that single mom and all of that kind of stuff. And it's pretty similar. We are essentially behind enemy lines. We're in a hostile environment where if we freely speak about what we actually believe and what we want to talk about, we get ostracized.
Correct. I mean, both Amos and I, we step beyond. We've stepped heterodox outside of what would be considered like Orthodox Christianity in a lot of ways. So we've seen that. We've seen like the minute you start to talk to a believer that doesn't agree with your theology, even if you just kind of hint at something, as you say, they're going to lock off. They're just like, oh, you're the devil. I'm going to back away slowly. And far less for red pill knowledge. Now, for those who don't know, we are talking about red pill in one sense of a change in mindset, something that you thought to be true that isn't true. But more specifically, we're talking about intergender dynamics, male and female nature, and the role of men in society. I think we would agree with that. So we know when you're dealing with people who are fundamentalists or have a belief, you're beating that ideology. Have you found anything that kind of opens the door to them kind of, maybe I'll give that some thought?
Yeah.
Or even scripturally, you might see something. I'll share something I found later on, but I'd love to hear what you think.
I would say, and this is something I teach my kids a lot, that the power is not in answering a question. The power is in asking a question. Whoever is asking the question is dictating the conversation and is the one getting the answers. It's kind of like in poker. You're getting someone to reveal their hand without you having to reveal your hand. And so I teach a couple of those power dynamics kind of things because those are literally like relatively amoral. Like the leftists won't get super mad at you with that. So I start with that. And then I start asking them the questions, and I start getting them to ask questions about, is this really going to be helpful? I want to major in puppetry. Like that's another dumb thing that like, Dave Ramsey and Aaron Clarey. I don't know if you know Aaron Clarey. He's one of my favorite Manosphere guys. But, they talk about all the worthless degrees all these kids want, and you won't make any money. So I was like, okay, do you know the salary of an average puppetry major?
Right.
Okay. Almost nothing. Oh, they work at Target. Okay. How much is that degree going to cost? Oh, $50,000. How do you feel about owing $50,000 to work at Target that you could work at right now? And I would ask those kind of questions like, do you think that's worth it? Do you think that's worthwhile? And so I'll just ask them all these questions about, and I'll just let something happen. And then I'll ask the questions after they screw up or ask the questions as they come along. Like they'll be listening to some like ridiculous rap song that's talking about like, oh, I love this girl, I'm going to die for her, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, do you think that's a healthy relationship? Do you think that guy has self-esteem? Does that guy have other options, or is that his only girl? You know what I mean? You just got to start asking questions. And that's my big thing is, question everything, kind of going back to my background. I had to play devil's advocate and I had to question everything. And that's kind of the critical thinking I've been teaching my clients, which is a good under the radar thing because no matter how leftist or angry you are, you can't argue with like, trying to question and get clarification on things. Like that's a neutral ground. So
Excellent.
Yeah.
I mean, even for myself, when with Christian, I hate to say Christians are the worst, but they are pretty bad.
Yeah.
With dealing with ideas outside their comfort zone. Like something specific that I've had to confront. I think there's a verse in scripture. I'm not sure exactly where it is. That talks about men love your wives like Christ loved the church. But what they don't see is the other half of it is women respect your husband. It doesn't say women love your husband. It says women respect your husband. And this goes to the heart of feminism and male role and authority in society. As Rollo has pointed out in his books, women will never love men the way that we love them. Men are the true romantics in that sense. It's not that women don't love us. It's a different type of love. But what we are supposed to have in the relationship is respect and authority, right? And that's what's been lost in the modern Advent. But all of our blue-pilled Christian friends are looking for love. They're looking for the girl to love them, love me, and they're chasing something that actually is unscriptural. It's actually, that's not really how it works. And the church is selling that. And, again, when I quote the verse to them and I make that distinction, like, hey, the woman actually is not supposed to love you like you love them. She's supposed to respect you. You're supposed to be respectable. And that's a real challenge. That's a real challenge for a lot of them. It opens up a great door of conversation. But yeah, that's what I've seen.
Yeah. And with that verse alone, that's a lot of those things where like everyone misquotes on purpose. You know what I mean? Where they only want to say the first half just because that sounds better to the current agenda. You know what I mean? And it's like
feminine imperative.
It's like another one where it's like judge not and you won't be judged, and people just quote that little section. But after that talks about, but if you do got to judge, here's a big list of qualifications and the whole plank in the eye, aspect. They don't want to quote that part. They only want to quote the judge not. You know what I mean? So they get away with their bad accountability decisions.
Context is lost. And I mean, this is why we have denominations, because everybody's going to interpret it differently. But yeah, I agree with it. And I think this is, again, goes back to the problem. Like Amos and I did a show last week about a lot of the issues we saw in the Christian church. And as we were discussing before, it is a business for better or for worse. Right now, there's a lot of financial incentive behind the current model of church. And as we were saying, women tend to control most of the finances in most of the households. And if you look at the makeup of most churches today, if it's more traditional, you tend to see the elderly. If it's more contemporary, you might see a mix, but it's mostly women.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of men. And I think the clergy and whoever is running these things, they might, I don't know if they're aware of it, but I think they cater to that female audience.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, has that been your experience? I know that's how it is out here in the UK and the few churches we've been to. What has been your experience?
Yeah, I would say it's very similar. And I think it's just right now the mainstream Christian message is to appeal to emotion so that you sit in those seats, and pay your tithes. You know what I mean? They're not they're not trying to get the hard truth. They're trying to appeal to the emotion. Like, they talk a lot about how, I'm sure you've heard this before, but a lot of the current Christian music is the Jesus is my boyfriend music, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Like, it doesn't appeal to men. You know what I mean? That doesn't appeal to the genre of man. It appeals to women. It appeals to your emotions, how they do their stage lighting and their presence, and they play the soft keyboard and guitar during prayer time. It's all an appeal to emotions. And most guys don't appeal to those emotions. You know what I mean? It's not really made for you. Just like, an NSYNC concert isn't really made for you. You know what I mean? They have a specific audience they're targeting, and it doesn't really appeal to those that aren't in it. So that's just what I've noticed.
Have you ever seen, Corey, have you ever seen any type of what I guess would be seen as like genuine or just really good, like red pill leaning type of context, I guess, in the church? Or do you think it's completely lost in the church? Like it's just not there at all?
Well, it's there, but it's not going to be where the crowds are. You know what I mean? Truth is the less road traveled, so to speak. So like if it's in the mainstream and if it's in the limelight and if it's on, a televangelist section, it's probably not going to be very truthful. The act that it's popular shows that it's not a very truthful thing because truth hurts and truth sucks, right? Most of the time. So there are places that I feel are good, but they're not going to be in the mainstream. So if it's cool and has a bunch of reviews on Yelp, I wouldn't trust it. Kind of like Oprah's book club. I wouldn't really trust that. Just because it's popular doesn't mean it's good. There is a specific ministry that I advocate for. It's a pastor named Sean McCraney online. He has like 3 or 4 YouTube channels for different sermons and things like that. And he started his own denomination called Christy Anarchy. And I'm very, very pro Sean McCraney. He started as an LDS who left the Mormon church. LDS is Latter-day Saints, Mormonism. He left that after when he was in his 30s or 40s, when he already was like married with kids in the church, and started a Christian ministry that's against the Mormon church and trying to get Mormons out of Mormonism and into Christianity. He did that for 5 or 6 years on a public channel, a public TV channel in Salt Lake City. So you could tell he's had some hard knocks trying to have a publicly anti-Mormon TV show in Salt Lake City, which is like 90% Mormon. And so you can tell he has balls, and he definitely is willing to speak the truth. And more recently, over the last year or two, he went on vacation and went to all of the mainstream churches and realized all of that's bullcrap. So he's actually changed his whole ministry and his whole church function. Instead of attacking the Mormon church and getting Mormons out, he's now attacking mainstream evangelical Christianity. And so he's a church that's against the mainstream and against like the feminist twist and all of that kind of stuff. And he's just real talk. And like, what I really expect him is he'll talk about all the sins he screwed up on like last week. He'll start talking about all the stuff he screwed up on, and he's very open. He had a series on finances, and he told everyone how much he makes from that church, how much of it is donation, how much of it is tithe, and he just opened up all of his finances and encouraged all the other Salt Lake churches to do the same, and none of them would. And so he's just trying to be like the role model. He doesn't use the term red pill or manosphere, things like that, but he's definitely on track. They're in the same brain length, I think.
Right. Yeah, the church I went to was kind of they had different things. I mean, it's funny you mentioned the money thing because they kind of went the other way. So they're one of these what you would call like the mega church types.
Oh yeah.
But what they did was they started weekly just before the tithe, and it's manipulation, but they really tried to play it off like we're just being real and we're just kind of showing what's going on. They would actually put up the budget like not necessarily like a P&L spreadsheet, but it was like it was getting there. It was like, here's how much money we need to maintain basic operations. Here's how much money we need for growth. This is the goal for growth. And here's how much we got from you guys last week. And it was like, so it was like their way of saying, but not actually saying, you need to give us more money because we didn't meet our goals.
Yeah.
But a funny thing too was at this church one time, this only happened once, is we went to a summer camp. This was we were in middle school when it was a high school summer camp. We go, and one of the days we were there, they did a split of like, okay, all the girls are going to go with the girl counselors, all the guys are going to stay with the guy counselors, and we're going to do like a separate thing. So I don't know exactly what the women were doing, but the girls were doing some other thing. Anyways, the guys, basically one of the youth pastor that had been handling the guy session basically read this book called Wild at Heart, which was this,
I know that book. It's interesting.
And he started kind of getting it. I guess the closest thing was it was supposed to subject us to some sense of, I guess, manhood or something, or at least whatever the book was talking about. I know my dad had read it at one point, and I like heard about it. But it basically, they were like, talking about being men and being wild, and like they had us go outside to like a part of the campground and dig a hole with your bare hands, and then we're gonna go play Red Rover for half an hour, being men. And then like that was the closest thing to any sort of real like red pill anything that I saw. And that was it. I'm guessing from the reaction I saw in you, it's probably not very red pilled at all.
Yeah, it's interesting because that book, it like tiptoes around the topics. It doesn't directly say like do this or do that, you know what I mean, or give that kind of guidance, which is a whole nother spiel for another day about that. But just what I've seen because I read it when I was in college, but I don't remember it much. I remember like some points were useful and some points were kind of pull you back into the blue pill world. But what I've seen is what people do after they read that book. And they started accusing other people. They're like, man, you can't work in a cubicle job anymore. Now you're not a God's man. Like if you work a 9-to-5 job, therefore you're not a man. And like, therefore, screw you guys. I've seen people do that at a church before, like telling people to quit their jobs and telling people to go do that because it's not manly enough to them. Because there is a lot of vague areas of like that, because it does talk about, from what I remember, Wild of Heart does talk about, finding your passion in your dream and don't just stuck in the rat race, that kind of thing. But they interpreted that as you're no longer a man and not following God's mission if you do have a 9-to-5 job. And so they were encouraging people to quit their jobs and go pursue godly passions. And I'm like, okay, and like everyone be hobos? That's cool, I guess. you gotta have a segue there.
Godly hobos.
Amos, one of the ministries you were involved in, they had that same kind of thing, like give up your job and just like give it all to preaching the gospel kind of thing. And
oh yeah, that was the first one. Yeah, because say what you want about whether what happened, but it was a lot of like live by faith, because I pretty much quit my job and I went, and I had some money, but I wasn't having any steady stream of income the entire time. It was pretty much hoping there'd be a lot of what Christians called Pentecostal handshakes.
Oh yeah, I know those. We call them Holy Ghost handshakes, but yeah.
For the listeners, it's basically where if you meet up with a Christian or people are like thanking you for your time, they shake your hand. They'll like slip a 20 or something in your hand as they're shaking your hand. It's like it's so freaking weird, but it's nice, when you were like me. I was pretty much the broke college kid, not in college. Was just granted, there were a lot of things that were taken care of for us, but there was no income. It was pretty much an internship for like 6 months. And somehow I got by with, living off of not much. But then again, I was in Texas, so food was cheap and fattening. So
good times.
Yeah. But yeah, it was very much that, like, the real life is just to the gospel. It's just, doing everything you can to preach the gospel I felt like I was doing something, but then later on realized, things were changing how I believed. And then I came back and was like, okay, now I got to work a job and save up money to go on trips and stuff. So,
yeah, you can have all the dreams in the world, but if you can't pay for them, you can't pay for them.
Yeah. Corey, I'd love to get your feedback. I mean, Richard Cooper, I mean, basically the Red Pill community has done a whole thing on single moms. And we're not touching on that. I want to know if you've got concerns about dating Christian women.
Ooh.
And we'll all comment on this.
Oh boy,
you need I know. Amos, do you want to go first? Give Corey some time, or Corey, you good to go?
I'll touch and go with mine because I don't want to turn this into a whole part 2-hour podcast. So I'll let you go first, and I'll summarize in my head.
We go a little bit over an hour and a half, so we're good there. Don't worry too much about the time there. No, Christian women. Boy, it's a really interesting topic. I haven't dated that many Christian women, so I wouldn't know. But what I can gauge is okay. So there was a pastor I had. He was the last pastor that I really started seeing going to his church regularly. And part of this, I'll say, like, kind of our red pilling on our theology. So I'll just say for Brook here. So right after we left that big church here in Minnesota to go start our own church before I went to Texas. Yes. We basically so there was a conversation one time. So I was part of the founding of a church, pretty much. I was part of a small group of people that met at this pastor's house weekly, and that slowly evolved into a church. Now they actually meet at a hotel room, not a hotel room, like a hotel conference room. They found a good deal. They meet there once a week, and they're slowly growing there too. But one of the things the pastor was, he was a lot more personable, being it was just a small group. So he'd say some things that you definitely would never really hear a pastor say in a pulpit, on especially from the church we were at, because the church we were at was on some these televangelist channels every now and then, but nothing mainstream, nothing too big. So we had one night, we're there at his place, and his son was there, and his son and I are about a year or two apart, 2 years apart. And we had gone to a lot of these same summer camps, like the one that was all about Wild at Heart and whatnot. And they did it a few times, especially in the high school ministry, the high school camp, was they would have a panel of like 4 boys and 4 girls, and they talk about dating and relationships, just getting different ideas. So there was, you would see a whole bunch of things. You would see some girls that were sort of going after the more, what you might see as a more like masculine, conventionally masculine man who at least takes charge. Not quite red pill. I don't remember too much of anyone actually saying anything truly red pill, but there was a lot of different things. But what was funny was, like, a lot of the girls were like, what is your idea of an ideal date? And then there was a lot of this, go to a dinner on a beach, and we're going to ride ponies and all this stuff, just really blue-pilled stuff. And guys would say this too. Guys would try to like basically paint like the full-blown blue pill kind of dating scenario, because that's just appealing. So there's a lot of this. And so I'm talking to this pastor, and his son's there. And we're both, now we're both like late teens. Like I think I was 18 and he was like 20, and we're talking, and we start talking like, we're like, yeah, that's just a bunch of bullshit. Like, all these guys are just, I just want this great date. And, we're going to go and have a nice dinner, and, we're going to be on the beach. Just a lot of the stuff. We started like mocking this idea, and the pastor just said, yeah, be real at least. Geez, like, we're going to the strip club, we're gonna get wasted. And my dad like freaks out and looks at me and goes, "You didn't hear the pastor say any of that." But that was just one of those things, like calling out the fact that a lot of this like conventional like blue pill ideology and just the way that worldview messed with just kids really at this point with their idea of dating. Now I look back on it and it's like, yeah, that's going to be a big problem, because you're just going to have a bunch of guys that are just, I mean, they'll have fairy tales running through their head.
Exactly.
Relationships. And there was only actually like one girl in that whole panel that was like, had some direction where she was like, so they talked about dating, like, how do you choose a place to go? Like, what kind of guy do you want? She goes, I want a guy that takes charge. I don't want him to ask me where we're going to eat. Tell me where we're going to eat. And I was like, and that was like different. All the girls were like, that's what the hell. And so that was just
for a change.
Exactly. It was like, no, you're telling me where we're going. So, but even the guys, like the most, the sharp looking guys that were sort of the, that all the girls had a crush on or whatever, but they were also like the spiritual guys. They didn't even know how to respond to that. So they weren't even like reciprocating. It was just kind of still a lot of the blue pill fantasies they were having. And now, I mean, even just seeing, even in the groups we were with, when I met this girl that I was engaged to, she was still filled with a lot of blue pill stuff. And yeah, I just, Christian girls, if I am ever coming across one, it's got to be someone who's like in name only. Like she, you talk to her a little bit and she's like, no, I just go to church because I've always gone to church. I don't really know what I really believe. Like, so she's open to like, she's basically not like indoctrinated.
Yeah.
In a lot of this stuff. So, do
you have something to add to that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was going through all the things that I would want to say, the vast amount, and I think I could summarize it down to like, there's a big saying on the Red Man group where it's like hypergamy doesn't care, and that still applies to church girls.
Explain to the listeners who might be new to this about hypergamy.
Hypergamy
in the Christian church, yeah.
However you want to call it, tomato, potato. Hypergamy is essentially that your sexual strategy is to trade up, where you are actively seeking somebody with a higher social status and power than yourself. And a female usually is looking for the best they can do, I think is a good way to explain it. And so if a woman is dating someone for a while and they're starting to get, jaded from it, and they're starting to realize, oh, this guy isn't all you cracked up to be, she'll start seeking around. Her radars will start coming back up, looking for other interest in higher status males, in her opinion, or in society's opinion. Most of females' opinions go towards the society end, because at the end of the day, they want like comfort and security, and they get that by snagging somebody better than them. And that's how they interpret it, and that's the sexual strategy of hypergamy that women go through. So how that applies to dating Christian girls is, it goes a lot into what Amos was just saying. Like, the church still teaches, Disneyland, nice guys always win, ideals. However, the traits of being the nice guy are antithetical to status and social power and social cues. And so if you're actively trying to be the nice guy and win women over with how nice you are and how much stuff you're willing to buy them and how much attention you're willing to give them, you are signaling they're better than you, and that the female is the catch for the nice guy. So therefore, hypergamy is repulsed by that because they want something better than them. They want somebody who doesn't give them a lot of attention. They don't want somebody who buys them stuff all the time, because that shows that guy is now in debt to her, if that makes sense. And so that's like the root, the basement, the foundation of hypergamy. And hypergamy doesn't care means that that is cross-cultural and cross any kind of social political boundaries. It's a universal term, whether you're in India, whether you're a Mormon, whether you're, a goth kid in his basement, smoking weed and listening to the Ramones, like anybody. That all of those social cultures all the women are still hypergamous, just what they see as social status is different. And so, sorry, I got a quick text. Let me throw that away. Yeah, and so when I was younger and when I was in church, they taught, the nice guys always win. Just be the nice guy. If you want a good, godly Christian girl, you need to be a good, godly Christian man and be willing to give up your life for her and all of those kind of things. And they start promoting, treat women like the church and your sisters in Christ. And one of the big things now is like, make sure you're platonic friends for a couple of years before you start dating. I'm like, all of that is antithetical to hypergamy. All of that is just straight up vagina repulsors. And so when you look, and like me going back and looking at my youth groups and all of those kind of church functions I went to when I was younger, like all of the nice church kids, at the end of the day, they didn't get any tail. You know what I mean? All of those promises that were told to them, if you do this, then you'll get godly women. All the godly women were still flocking to the kid that used to be in the gang and used to sell the drugs and stuff. And now he's revamped and now trying to go to youth group and change his ways. But like at the end of the day, that still showed some kind of social power and competence, that he was willing to be in the gang and drugs, that stuff. So they still got the women, no matter what you did as the nice guy thing. So yeah, my final say is hypergamy doesn't care, and hypergamy is still involved with Christian women. They're not any different than any other women in the world.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, Christianity in society, it's a subgroup.
Yeah.
And it has its own bunch of rules. And exactly what you're pointing on would have been my point, where women, well, they say they want, a man of God. They want somebody who's given to prayer and fasting and, all of these Christian spiritual disciplines. And my pet peeve is, of course, that's you're focusing on completely the wrong things, right? Relationships are mostly physical, are mostly carnal interactions.
Carnal.
Even Paul said it. He was like, look, if you're in a sexual relationship, don't deny each other. Like, have sex, right? Don't come apart except with consent for a brief period of prayer. But he actually said that the sex was more important than prayer, right? That's literally what he says, right? He says that coupling is more important than prayer. And the church focuses on completely the opposite. They say, no, you need all the spiritual discipline. And they completely ignore the person, the individual. And the reason that's so dangerous is because, let's be real, you can hide all kinds of mental and demented mentalities behind the veil of Christian discipline. You can hide OCD, bipolar disorder, depression, all sorts of addictions behind the veil of Christian discipline. So while the women are looking at all this, oh my God, look how much time he spends in prayer, they don't realize that he's on the verge of an alcohol problem and he needs that prayer because at any minute he's going to snap. And this is the danger that I see. So when I go out, I dated a lot of Christian women. Holy hell did I date Christian women. I would go out and the first thing I would do is drink a beer in front of them. I would swear and I would tell like a rude joke. And based on those three things, I'll kind of get a sense of how devoted are they to the ideology, or are they looking at the person? And many didn't survive. Many fell to the wayside. I've done a lot of work on that. I have a couple of articles on this, and it's basically Gnosticism, where the church thinks everything spiritual is good, everything physical is bad. And what we taught in our school of thinking about the incarnation is that God became man. That means he approved of man to the point where it was so good, he actually took the physical body of Jesus and ascended to heaven, right? So the human experience is now intertwined in the faith community. God and man are forever joined. So Jesus taught us it's okay to be a man. It's okay to be human. And he went through the full human experience. But that's the part that the church has never been comfortable with. So our desires, our sexuality, our passions, hypergamy, our mating strategies, these are all things that the church just has no clue about. And they focus on what they can deal with, which is the Christian discipline. They teach that to young people that's complete. I know so many Christian couples that got married thinking, oh, I found the most spiritual woman of prayer, the prayer warrior, the future pastor, and all this kinds of stuff, to find out all types of abuse, addiction, and all those things were lurking below the surface. So my advice is, for anybody out there who might be in this kind of Christian relationship, the Christian discipline is the least important part of a Christian relationship. Right? Her attitude, her as a person, you as a person, compatibility. I mean, we could recommend the book, The Tactical Guide to Women.
Oh, yeah.
That I know Richard Cooper and others. Yeah. Great book.
Yeah, Sean Smith. That's one of my favorite books.
Great guy.
I promote that to everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, let's get into the real elephant in the room, which of course I think most of our brothers will be questioning. What about sexuality in the church? Dun dun dun.
Oh boy.
You mean like premarital sex and all that?
Right. I mean, let's take today. This is obviously a challenge that a lot of our red pill Christian believers are going to be struggling with. Mm-hmm. And we know, based on the kind of theology, is the idea of spinning plates, and we should be engaging in, some kind of evaluation sexually. Of course, that conflicts with the more traditional understanding of premarital sex and all these other kinds of things. So I know this is the big topic for a lot of guys. So anybody want to chime in on that?
Boy, I got a lot. I'll try to write this. I'll try not to make this another long-winded rant. But how I wrote this down, and this is some of the emails I was bringing up with other Manosphere guys we were talking about, was there's 3 prongs to me. Go for it. There's 3 prongs to me in dealing with this situation that come from the Bible. Wait, am I muted? No, I'm not. Awesome.
You're good. Go ahead. Keep going.
Right. So the first prong is from talking about premarital sex or sex before marriage. The first prong is like defining marriage in the biblical sense of when someone would be using that. And we talked about a little of this before we were live, was talking about like the difference between biblical marriage and now. It's a very recent phenomenon that we had to physically tell the government we're getting married and have to have the government involved in a legal binding contract of marriage.
With a license.
A lot of places didn't have that. You know what I mean? That's not a normal thing that the government would have to be overseeing a human relationship in that way. And so I talk about legal marriage versus spiritual marriage, and what does that mean? A lot of places in the Bible and a lot of religions talk about marriage from a spiritual aspect and what those connotations are. But right now in our American culture, we blend those together into the same thing, where we say spiritual marriage is legal marriage. But like the last 1900 years of history, that wasn't a thing. So like,
correct. It's
so crazy that the church is so hard-heartedly like gripping onto this truth that's only been around for like 1 century. You know what I mean? That legal and spiritual marriage are the same thing. One of the examples I always think of is I don't have all of the, I don't have anything offhand because we kind of just brought this up, but like when there was still legalized slavery, in the 1600s, it was illegal for slaves to get married, yet they still had ceremonies and they still got married within their own group, so to speak. None of the people in the church, I believe at the time or right after, were saying, yeah, those are still spiritually binding marriages where they jumped over a broomstick or had their own little ceremony, but it was illegal according to, the U.S. government at the time. So are they married or are they not married? The church won't talk about that. You know what I mean? Like, what are we doing now?
Right.
It's clearly a separation between a spiritual biblical marriage and a legal marriage. And like, that's one prong of 3. I don't want to rant too much on the other ones. I'd like to hear you guys' opinions on it.
Go ahead, Brook.
Me? Okay. No, I agree with you on the marriage issue. It's an interesting one, because what the Bible doesn't, as you say, it doesn't really say a lot about what actually constitute marriage. Mm-hmm. I would basically say it's sex, like virginal intercourse, the breaking of the hymen, the blood, and that's the covenant and whatever, right? Because that's Adam and Eve, right? If you go back to the very beginning, that's kind of it. But yeah, I agree that the spiritual side of it. And this is the dilemma we have in this day and age for Christian men. Well, for myself, I understand that a lot of the sexual language used in the Bible is not always talking about physical sex. Some of it is used, especially if what was the name of your pastor French from the Anarchy Church?
Oh yeah, the Christian Anarchy Church. His name's Sean McCraney.
Right, sure.
His ministry is called Heart of the Matter. I forgot to.
Heart of the Matter. I'm sure he would understand this as well if ever you get the chance to bring it up. But God uses sexual language in the Bible to talk about spiritual adultery. Mm-hmm. So things like in the book of Revelations, it talks about the 12 churches, and he's going to throw this harlot in a bed, and whoever has sex with the harlot is the kings will have sex with the harlot, and whoever that is would be condemned. That's not a literal woman, not a literal bed. He's talking about Israel having sex with the Roman Empire to gain wealth and protection, at least in the preterist interpretation. He would talk about Israel not being faithful to the covenant. He said, you're worse than a harlot. You pay your lovers to sleep with you. Terms like adultery and stuff like that. So some verses are that the church has used to kind of do the sex before marriage thing are actually totally out of context in my understanding, and have to do more with spiritual stuff. Now, there are verses, Corinthians and other places, where it does talk about that. There is a cultural side, and I'm not pushing for sex before marriage. I think everybody has to work this out for themselves. Women were very much possessions in the early church. They were seen as, value to the family. And the virginity was part of the dowry and all these other things. So having sex before marriage was actually damaging to the property. I think that plays a little bit into it as well. But now we have a new problem. And Amos and I were talking about this before. So if the church, and it's a losing proposition for the church, if you're going to insist on no sex before marriage, but we as human beings have natural desires for sexual relations, and we're also getting married later in life. So unbeknownst to some, I'm 38 years old and I'm not married. Now, according to good old
shame.
Yeah, I know. And I haven't popped out like 3.2 kids. It's I'm not doing my part.
Do you at least have a white picket fence?
Not this is England, man. There are no fences. But yeah, so I mean, according to Christian doctrine, I would be waiting, let's say my hormones, let's just say 18. I mean, I was involved in stuff before that, but let's just say 18. I became born again, whatever, converted at 18. So at least from 18 to 38, which is 20 years, you're basically saying that, I should have no sexual expression, not even masturbation, because at least in the Western church, that's also frowned upon. Not so much in the Eastern church. They're a little more flexible. But that's a losing proposition, especially for young people. And I think they see that, which is why I mean, I'm far removed from the young generation in church, so I can't speak to it. But I know in my day, yeah, man, the guys were cranking it out, bro. I mean, everybody's all pious and all this other kind of shit, and then, they're coupling off and they're doing what they have to do. They just don't tell anyone, right? So I don't want to give advice on that in the sense, because people have to work that out in their journey of faith. There are ways that you can kind of figure it out if you really wanted to. And at the end of the day, people are going to do what they want to do regardless. All the Jesus fish in the world, if you're with her and right place at the right time, things are going to happen. And my last piece of advice on that, anybody who has been involved in that kind of premarital sex or sexual activity, don't judge yourself. Don't condemn yourself. I think the condemnation and the church's inability to deal with sexuality in the church healthily has caused even bigger damage than a lot of this other stuff. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on the topic. Over to you, Amos.
Oh boy. Yeah, so yeah, that was something that I kind of had to really figure out too, because even while religious, I was with my ex, the BPD girl who I was engaged to. We were living together. The plan, I mean, it was something we agreed on was, all right, the wedding day is this day, and we move in together the day after, kind of thing. or no, something like that. We had it all planned out where it was going to be this deal where we lived together and like, okay, nothing would go wrong. Well, then we postponed the wedding and we pretty much agreed like we're still going to live together. And all sorts of hell came down from my family who was more religious. Even, so I have my parents who are, pretty religious. And then my grandparents were Catholics, like pretty devout Catholics. So, I mean, instantly I get a call that's like, from my grandmother who's, so you're living together. Yep. Yeah. So you're going to be having sex then. I'm like, really, Grandma? This is what we're going to be talking about. But
what does she know about that?
Exactly. So, it was definitely something we had to really we kind of just chose as a way to overcome. And then this is a whole other thing too, was the girl wasn't a virgin while I was. So there was just a lot of things we were working through. I mean,
oh, I have a story on that too when you're done.
Yeah. I mean, Brook here had shared an article, which we don't remember where you found the article, but was there an article you sent around that was basically a guy giving a really good scriptural basis to basically question the idea of premarital sex?
Yeah, I don't remember where it is, but yeah.
Yeah, it was something. It basically kind of just breaks it all down and kind of shows that there's really no clear doctrine. It's purely some sort of a cultural thing that just popped up out of nowhere.
Dogma for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean it's kind of what is it? The Brooke, John Crowder talks about the marriage supper of the Lamb and wine, how that was changed to water at one point.
Right.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, the feast that you would
the
have
love feast. Yeah.
Yeah, you would basically, it was turned to water at one point, and then even the Welch, who was a Methodist preacher, created grape juice, as a way to create
pasteurizing.
Exactly.
The grapes.
Yeah. Welch grape juice has, it's like you tell people that, it's like, what? Yeah, it was created as a substitute to wine, so that it could still be looking like wine while not being alcoholic. And now we have grape juice.
I mean, we have actual verses that say Jesus turned water into wine.
The church has been trying to change it back ever since.
Yeah, and the church wants to go and say, well, that the wine back then, they had to drink a whole barrel to barely get buzzed, and it's like, what?
No, yeah, I'm pretty sure everyone was sloshed at that party.
It does say that. It says they were well drunk, and if you look at the word in the Greek, it does mean blitted. It means out of their mind drunk.
Oh, yeah.
And Jesus was too, which is even crazier.
He's the supplier, at least,
Yeah. He bought drinks for people who were already drunk. That's like giving Coke to a cokehead who's already high. I mean, that's the life of the party, right? This goes back to the humanity side of Jesus that the church couldn't handle. So Jesus turns the water to wine. The church has been trying to change it back ever since.
Yeah.
It's not like Jesus was trying to go absolutely batshit crazy and engage in some sort of Roman thing or something. Everyone's
honestly, we don't know.
Oh yeah, there is that too. But it's just that's the whole thing. So we had basically done that, and then once I kind of was moving away from just being a minister and such, my beliefs started to kind of shift with that, and I pretty much just threw away that whole belief of premarital sex. I no one can really, people just say it as a theology, as a dogma, and I don't hear any clear scriptural basis on it. Well, the Bible says so. Well, where? Tell me how. How did you come to this? Yeah. I haven't had that conversation too many times, but it's just that's where I am, is I can't really find any good reason in the Bible.
Yeah, it's not a fun conversation to have because there's no conversation. It's not spelled out anywhere in the Bible.
And honestly, depending upon it's like with Christians, you could just really just say it's none of your business. Yeah. Why are you so interested in that? Because it's an uncomfortable topic for Christians too. It's they know what happens, but it's man, I would hate to be the guy that is 24 years old, never having done anything, We've probably done something. I mean, we're human anyways, but it's like, then your first time having sex is the most awkward thing ever, because that happens for a lot of people, is with your wife on your wedding night. That's going to fuck things up,
Yeah, what a first impression,
I mean, it happens. Just to be real, we do know of Christians, two virgins getting married. It does happen. I'm not disputing that.
Right.
For the most of us, I would say, have had, not everybody's been brought up in the church. So most of us have had a conversion experience, and we had a life. We had a life before we came to the church. I was reading today about porn stars that are now preaching in the church and this kind of stuff. So
there's an actual ministry called xxxchurch.com, and it's anti-porn, and they recruit porn stars or former porn stars to like
Shelley Lubin. I know the ministry. I wanted to touch on something Amos said about the virginity thing. I had the reverse issue that Amos had, where I wasn't the virgin and I had a girlfriend, almost fiance, that was. And the amount of shit I got for that, right? Like, because the virginity was so esteemed, and we have the whole, what's it called, the chastity ring, or
promise ring.
The promised ring, and all these unbiblical things they try to put pressure on young people and stuff like that. And I'd be happy to say I dated two Christian girls. Both of them were virgins. They were virgins when I met them. They were virgins when they left me. The guy after me popped it out, but that's, and he was also in the church, but that, that's his business, right? I don't need to get into the details of that, but I got shit from my one of my ex-girlfriends, because she basically said, "Why didn't you wait for me?" And all this kind of romanticized ideology. And I remember saying to her something that absolutely pissed her off, which was, if you were not in the church, if you were not a Christian, this would not even be a discussion. That people in the supposed outside the faith have more grace and forgiveness for this issue than people in the church who are supposed to be forgiving and loving.
Yeah.
That's the bullshit that I had to put up with. I mean, fortunately, I got out of that church pretty much right after that and never looked back.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's just crazy how much we've and it's funny because I was talking about before, it's such a recent dogma too, about the premarital sex and all of that kind of thing, because we're like, oh, it's been on since the dawn of time, like Leave It to Beaver 1930s and 40s, like
yeah, that's the beginning of time, isn't it? Television.
Yeah. It's just like recently when we became super Puritan, that's when we started like abstaining all that stuff. And before, when we were talking about like when they're changing the words, like the water and the wine and all of that, actually the root word for fornication is fornix, which is an archway where prostitutes hang out. And most of the sections in the Bible, Old and New Testament, whenever they refer to specifically transactional sex, prostitution, and idolatry, because most prostitutes were worshiping a different god for their prostitution. Yeah. That's when like the gloves came off and the Bible was super anti that.
And
all of
that is the context of
referencing idolatry and prostitution as one and the same. The word
they were temple prostitutes
until we became Puritans. So
no, you're spot on. The Corinthian verse in its context is probably, and I mean, I don't know the mind of Paul when he wrote it. Ishtar worship was involved in temple prostitutes. They were prostitutes part of the temple. So he talks about, look, you're a Christian, don't use this supposed, these spiritual, this spiritual practice of having sex with prostitutes to another god.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that is what he's possibly that's how I would describe the context of the Corinthian verses. So I agree with you. A lot of it is seen as transactional. And it is connected to spiritual side. It is that side of it. But yes, I'm not interpreting for other people. People have got to come to their own research and discover this for themselves.
It's also good to point out, especially when you talk about Corinthians, Corinthus was like the Las Vegas of that world.
Yes.
There was a lot of partying, a lot of prostitution, gambling, the works. So that was like the sin city of the biblical world at that time. And correct. So and you can also tell when you read those letters, a lot of Paul's like criticisms were on way more extreme scenarios than the other churches that are already kind of Jewish-y. But yeah, Corinth was just like straight up, Las Vegas, everyone party, go wild, in the name of random gods. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the historical context to a lot of these things are missed on the church.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a big thing for me, understanding, okay, the Apostle Paul wrote to the Gentiles. The other 12, well, not all of them wrote, but Mark and Matthew and these others, John and these others, actually wrote specifically for the Jews.
Yeah.
And their understanding of the scriptures were very different to what we would have today. It doesn't mean that they didn't cross over, because Paul was always interacting with the Jews as well. But that time period context of what was going on at the time has a lot.
Oh.
I think you're skipping a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy. Oh, you cut out there for a sec, Brook. Oh boy.
Oh, internet. Yeah, I'm not getting it right now. Brook is
not getting. You still there, Brook? Oh boy.
We got some internet crashes or something.
Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut out there for like a good 10, 15 seconds there. Yeah, he was trying to get onto a different Wi-Fi at one point. Let's see here.
Oh, it's all right. No, it's all right. It's we'll figure it out. Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Yeah. The video spacey, but the audio is at least better.
Oh boy.
Thanks, internet.
Let's see here.
Alrighty. Yeah, Brooke says he can hear us at least.
Okay. But well, we completely missed what he was saying.
Yeah.
Context. It's all context. That's it.
Cliff Notes. Brought to you by Brooke.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is pretty much, yeah, when people look at the Bible, they think it's all like speaking directly to us without removing all historical context, removing all the intentions of the writer, who he's talking to, what is it, Brook? Audience relevance, all of this stuff. And even like how the flow of each letter that Paul was writing goes too. A lot of this is going in all sorts of directions, and Christians have taken that to be completely backwards since, I don't know, ever since we started interpreting what's in the Bible. But
correct.
Yeah, it's again, yeah, you can't, as you were saying, Brooke, when you were mentioning a lot of these scriptures that people are using, it's like, wait, what? I mean, you said, what was it, from Revelation? People were basically trying to use scriptures from Revelation to talk about premarital sex.
Marriage. Yeah.
Yeah. What? Since when?
and it's an apocalyptic book, which means it's full of imagery. It's not meant to be taken literally,
Right. So it's just like, anyways. Not sure what else to add to that. I mean, for me personally, my experience is really just, I don't really see that theology as valid really for any Christian man to really hold on to. I mean, good for people, if guys really want to, save themselves from marriage, I can see that there is some merit to that. I mean, in terms of commitment or, for both the man and the woman, there might be something there. But if you're like 30, you're not, and you've done that, I really don't know what's going to be happening in that bedroom on your wedding night. And it's probably not going to be good, because that's a whole lot of pent up energy. And without having any healthy expression of it at all, you're not going to, it's probably going to do more damage than good.
I'd agree.
Yeah. I think that is something we didn't touch on too much. Brooke may have touched on it. We couldn't hear him. I don't know. But we're talking about the age differences and the society differences because, like you said before, like we're waiting later and later to get married in our things. But biblical marriage, I think like the women were at puberty and the men were like in like 18 to 20, as far as I understood. So like
much more than that.
Territory for the biblical world is, if we're trying to go back and look at that, like our society doesn't roll that way. You know what I mean? Very rarely do you see 17, 18-year-olds hooking up with 13-year-olds. It's actually illegal. But that's when they talked about sex and marriage in when you read it through the New and Old Testament, they're talking about 18-year-olds and 13-year-olds. So
it's actually a good point that like atheists bring up when they want to confront the idea of, oh, you know, Christians want biblical marriage. Okay, so you want like, you know, you want virgins who are, you know, who are property, who are, you know, barely getting into puberty, that are being, you know, married off to, you know, older men. I mean, it's pretty darn close to kind of you know, how we criticize even like, you know, Muslim marriages, kind of their idea, you know, the child brides and all that. It's like, yeah, that was a lot of what you know, in biblical times, that was very much the culture. So you want biblical marriage, you know, if you can't even figure out biblical marriage, how can you tell me about biblical ideas on premarital sex, how to go about relationships, how to esteem your wife, how to even like we've changed a lot of things. Like, you know, if you're close enough with someone and you have a ceremony and you don't have a piece of paper, does the church nowadays recognize that? They probably don't.
Probably not, but they should. Or it's none of their business is really should be the answer. So.
I agree.
Yeah, and it's just like, so the church is the church has definitely compromised its ideas to culture, which is probably not all the worst, but they can't be turning around and saying, you know, well, you know, the Bible says this, that, and the other, as they interpret it, when they're doing all these other things that probably can't. It's probably even harder to try to, you know, manufacture out of scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Corey, I love what you said about the age difference.
Yeah.
Joseph was probably older than 18, though, just to be frank.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But even up until my grandparents had like a 15-year age gap.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I'm sure a lot of the old folks had very substantial age gaps. And even in this modern society, I know Rollo talks about this, the female imperative, men should date women their own age. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, because, you know, as we know, sexual marketplace and all these different types of things, it serves women who are older if men will kind of stick within their thing. But ironically, it's condemned by the church too. So I had a 9-year age gap with my last Christian girlfriend, right? Which it's not huge. It's big, but it's not huge. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
She was 18. I would have been about 27 going, you know, and that was kind of thing. Didn't do anything until she was 18. But yeah, I got a lot of heat for that too.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts?
But why? That's the real question is why. That's the thing that always business. Why do they care? Like,
yeah, I think the church is
fine. Okay, like get out of my business, you know?
Exactly. That should have been my response, but I was so submissive. It's just like, okay, if you want to know what's going on, fine. But you're absolutely right. I think the church, the organized church, has overstretched itself into people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Do we want to touch on masturbation?
Nice way to word that, Brooke.
Because I know we're coming up on time, but I know this is another big one for the guys out there.
What about, so there was a scripture of the guy in the Old Testament that we'll just say, you know, came onto the floor and got struck down by God. We know about that, right?
Yes.
Is that tend to be the scripture people refer to? Like,
I definitely got struck down by the Lord every time I masturbated.
but again,
I'm getting hit by lightning every week. It's ridiculous.
It's rejuvenating.
It's what keeps me young. No.
Lightning strikes.
But I mean, again, it's the context, right? The man is supposed to raise up kids for his dead brother. That's according to the Jewish law. So why he's struck dead is because he's not fulfilling the law, not because he, jizzed on the floor, right?
Yeah.
He was trying to keep the inheritance for himself, and even if you actually believe it's a true story, but yeah, that has nothing to do with normal bodily functions.
Yeah, it's like, man, I should be struck down, having a wet dream. Jesus.
Yeah. I've just never really had an opinion on it because I never thought it was a big deal. I never believed any of that. You're going to hell if you touch a pee-pee. You know what I mean? Yeah, it didn't make any sense at all. To me, the big thing is going back, and it kind of goes with that Christianity thing. You go back to somewhere in the Bible, which was like the bare minimum, or where something was supposed to be good or proven, with the minimal amount of requirements. So I would go back and look at like Adam and Eve, pre-fall of man, sin, yada yada, when everything was good. Did they have a sex drive?
Yeah.
If so,
two kids later, at least.
This is now a normal thing. You can't blame it on sin. This is now a normal thing if it existed pre-sin.
There was
everything was good.
Yeah.
There was a class so I had a foreign exchange student, and he was when I was in high school, and he took a class where they had to read I don't know if it was like a speech class or something, but there was one part of their course they had to do this play, so to speak. So it was between him and then a friend of mine, and so our exchange student, he was playing in this play or whatever it was. He was playing the devil, and the other guy was playing God. And this was basically, they were talking right after Adam and Eve were created. And they're basically talking about how Adam basically had no sex drive. Because they were both so pure of heart that they couldn't approach each other. Like Adam would walk up to her and kind of, have a good conversation. He goes, oh he's no, not happening. And the play is supposed to just mock the idea of this idea. And it's like, oh, Adam and Eve just couldn't get it on. And, so then the devil the play is the devil is convincing God, let me just go down there and get them to get it on, I thought it was kind of funny, but because that's kind of, I think it's also kind of bringing to light the fact that that's kind of how Christians see it. Sort of pre-fall Adam and Eve probably just only had sex to procreate.
Yeah,
probably.
That's a curse of sin. That sex feels good.
They had no carnal mentality. They had no flesh. Really, it was just they would just kind of float together, and baby pops out. It's just
yeah, it's ridiculous.
That is the biggest pile of horse shit that I've ever heard in my life. And I actually do know why. Because let's be real, right? In terms of sexual intercourse, there's lust involved, right?
Yeah.
You can't crank it out if there's no kind of desire. There's lust. But the church has demonized lust as one of the quote 7 deadly sins. So in the Puritan mindset, it's very difficult for them to understand that no, actually, that desire, that lust for your wife or Adam and Eve was actually part of God's plan. And again, because Christianity doesn't know how to deal with humanity, the human side to us, they just demonize the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's why they can't reconcile it. But that's very funny, Amos. I would have died laughing in that cinema or theater or whatever.
Yeah, it was just they were doing a reading, and this was in high school, so I just thought it was kind of a funny story, kind of like a parody. But then I didn't realize how it sheds light on so many different ideas. But the thing, I guess the big thing with masturbation is sort of because you're going, when you're doing it, you're sort of in thought, you're thinking about whatever you're thinking about. And that's supposed to maybe fulfill what Jesus said about, having lust in your heart. If you think lustfully about a woman, you might as well have committed adultery in your heart.
Yeah. It specifically says if you lust after another woman. So I guess gay porn's on the menu, I guess.
Anime.
How do we want to take this?
Hentai.
Exactly.
What about
that's ink and drawing, sir? That is not a woman.
Futa girls? I don't know.
Oh God, fucking don't even talk about that shit.
I mean, even that verse is out of context, right? Because the word Greek there, it means wife. You can't have adultery with a woman. You can have adultery with a married woman.
Yeah.
But the church, not wanting to deal with sexuality, just said, "Well, all women." You know, it's bullshit, man. You know.
Yeah, it's such a weird throwaway term that has ruined so many lives
It
over
has.
generations. You know what I mean? Or that one little tweak. You know what I mean?
Imagine some like, troublemaker kid that's like, yeah, man, I've committed adultery with so many women. Yeah, that one kid in church that's like, yeah, I've been with so many, porn stars. It's great.
What do you mean porn stars? Just looking at Tinder, just swiping right, and he's committing adultery.
Instagram, Twitter, everything.
Yeah, how we doing on time, Amos?
No, we're good. We're good. I mean, if you want to talk a little bit more, put more hands.
Up to you, Corey. Is that something you specifically wanted to touch on?
I think there's just one more point that I think would be important to bring up about the whole premarital sex aspect is in the Old Testament, there's not really any explanation from any part of the church really as to, oh, marriage is one man and one woman. Oh, and if you're a king, 400 concubines.
Thank you.
Nobody talks about
multiple
that.
wives. There's actually a verse after David sleeps with Bathsheba, and I've taken this to heart, and it's actually worked for me for some reason. David sleeps with Bathsheba. Nathan the prophet shows up. I think it's Nathan. Yeah, it's Nathan. And basically rebukes the king, right? He talks about the man had a one ewe, the other man had plenty ewes, and the rich man took the man's one ewe and slaughtered it for his traveler. And David gets all angry and says, why have you done this? Who's this man? I'll kill him. And Nathan says, well, you're the man. You stole Bathsheba, right? David and Bathsheba. So you stole this other man's wife, right? Uzziah's wife. And in the rebuke, God actually says to him, if you wanted more wives, you just had to ask. Now, if that's not a controversial scripture, I don't know what is.
That is okay. Wow, I did not know that.
So God has no problem with more wives, man.
Yeah, it's just fun. I just love how nobody talks about it in the church. They just like nervously sweat as they read past it in Bible study. Like, I hope nobody asks a question about this.
Or they probably don't even look past it. Like,
yeah. We'll skip those 3 verses and then go to 8. Don't read those.
I mean, we talked about this too, Brooke and I. Another time we talked about how like there's typical Christian behavior, like a lot of Christians on Facebook or whatever social media. They're posting scriptures. Read this in devotional today, felt really whatever. And I thought, okay, so I mean, it's just any scripture. There's so many scriptures, and I thought, and even the way my parents and just I saw this too, just that Christian mentality of like, scripture is just without, it's inerrant, without error. You could just post whatever you want, and it's a good thing because it's scripture. And you'd hear all these jokes about it, and I thought about like, man, I should just take like the most explicit Song of Songs,
Song of Solomon.
Yeah.
What is it? Song of Songs or Song of Solomon?
It's both.
Yeah.
As long as you know what book you're talking about, who cares?
And I thought I should just take the most explicit passages and just put them all together and like write it all out in a way that it looks like I'm writing something just on my own, and people will go, what is this? And at the very bottom, quote the scripture.
Really fine print. Yeah.
Exactly. Just to like mess with Christians, because they're like, gee, what the hell is up with this guy? Like talking about, oh, it's in the Bible. The Bible talks about, all sorts of things.
Yeah, it just in general, it's funny because everyone wants to talk about, the Jesus meek and mild and everybody be nice, like we were talking about before. But I mean, if you made a full movie of the Bible, that is a hard R, that is a hard rated R, but nobody wants to talk about it. You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous. So I want to do, something similar. You could do like, you always have the Christian girl Instagram where they take a picture of a coffee next to the sunrise and their Bible open. in their passages, like you're talking about before, but make the passage like we decapitated all of the women and all the Old Testament war stories, and just quote that with a bunch of hearts around it with your coffee Bible. Nobody wants to do that. Yeah,
there has to be like a Christian red pill meme group somewhere.
Oh yeah.
But, anyways, anything else you wanted to add, Brook?
No, I think this has been a fantastic discussion. I mean, I know we could go more in depth on a lot of these things. We are kind of over the time now, but Corey, I personally want to thank you for your input, for the work that you've been doing. I mean, it's not easy to talk about these things in a community of faith. So I applaud you, my friend, and come back. Let's continue the discussion at some point.
Oh yeah,
I'll definitely do a part 2 sometime. Yeah,
definitely.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Anyways, thank you everyone for joining us today on the podcast. You can check us out again next week, Sundays at 11 o'clock Central Time. That's in the morning. Check out our other episodes. Like, comment, and subscribe on the channel here. And follow Brook here on social media at Twitter. Now, Corey, do you have any other social media besides your own Facebook, or you're just?
Well, I have a YouTube account that I usually comment through. It's just Conk, C-O-N-K. You'll see me regularly on Rich's channel. What?
You are Conk. I've seen your stuff.
Yeah. I'm around a lot. I'm a moderator on Entrepreneurs in Cars for their chat. So yeah, I've been around a while. I want to start doing my own YouTube videos. I actually have a journal of all the stuff, and I want it to be red pill and religion focused. Ever since we started bringing this up a couple months ago, and Rolo was talking about his book, and I have 27 video topics, including some of the stuff we talked about today, including like the feminized church, all 3 prongs of why I think the premarital sex in Christian culture today is bullshit, all of that stuff. And so I have about 27 videos. I even have some funny ones what I did in college. I have one where the church should be more like Slipknot, the metal band. And I have why pastors should be more like the Joker and not Batman.
Fantastic.
So those are some great essays I did in college. I could definitely make video. So,
Awesome.
That'll be happening eventually. I'm juggling a lot of balls right now, but I definitely want to start uploading on my own channel as well, getting more in deep into this red pill stuff.
But yeah, definitely check. We'll have to check that out and promote that too. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today, and we will of course see everyone next week.
Awesome.
Thanks.